All right. So good to have all of us here today. Probably there'll be people still trying to find our page. So let me just double check with May now whether we are live. Yes, we are live already. Okay, I think she can see it already. So thank you so much for joining us today in these theological conversations. Our main purpose is really to have a conversations with all these experts of the field, pastors who are pastoring, and they are our friends of Bible school, and of course they have been teaching in Bible school as well. So that's the reason why I gathered this bunch of people here for this good conversation in view of this COVID-19, and we are thinking about particularly on Holy Communion and the doctrine of the church, because these two things matters a lot with all these movement restrictions. I'm not able to go back to church, and post COVID-19, we don't know how exactly it will turn out. So that's where this conversation is. So today we have a very distinguished guest with us. Let me just introduce one by one. Starting with the lady, Reverend Wong Yin Ming, Senior Pastor of Subang Jaya Assemblies of God. And then we have Reverend Christopher Park, Senior Pastor of Glad Tidings Sunway, Reverend Koki, Pastor of Harvest Community Church, as well as former President of BCM. And then we have Reverend Yitam Wang, who is the President of Asia Pacific Theological Seminary. This is the regional schools for our Assemblies of God. As well as finally, Reverend Dr. Chan Nam Chen, who is the Executive Director of Asia CMS. And I myself is Victor, current President of Bible College. I'm the host for this session. And so, are you all ready? This is very new for us. What we'll do is I will start off by introducing a topic, and then one of you will start talking about it. And after that, any one of you can feel free to just contribute or ask any questions. And I'll be also taking questions from Facebook Live as well. Okay. So let's start with, because we are a Pentecostal Bible school, and we have Reverend Tam Wan here today. And he is the president of our graduate regional Bible school. So we want to invite Pastor Tam Wan to, first of all, help us to understand what is our Pentecostal positions with regards to Holy Communion, or some people call it Eucharist, or some people call it the Lord's Supper, and also the doctrine of the church. So, Pastor Tam Wan, enlighten us with this.
With regard to the, in fact, with any doctrine, it's quite difficult to pinpoint anything that would be truly Pentecostal and uniform across the board. With Holy Communion, generally, we take what some people call the Zwinglian position, so that Holy Communion is a memorial. That will be different from Catholics with their transubstantiation and the rest of the and then the rest of the church generally would be, particularly Lutherans and others, would be consubstantiation. That is generally the Pentecostal position. With the Assemblies of God, I assume that it would be also the Zwinglian position, where it will be memorial. Sometimes it's also described in a rather unflattering way, in the sense that the rest of the church body has a sacramental position, but those of us with the memorial idea sometimes call the ornamental position. So it's more for show and memorial. In sacramental, I suppose it would mean that grace will come into the whole thing, whereas in an ordinance, it's more for a memorial. And with regard to the church, it's even more. There are even more different positions with regard to the church. I participate with the Lutheran Pentecostal dialogue, and quite often you'll see among Pentecostals ourselves, we couldn't agree on any position. whereas the Lutherans, they are quite confident, they know what their positions are, they have quite clear doctrinal positions on these things. But when Pentecostals differ, in fact, coming back to that Holy Communion thing, there are also those that we have two ordinances, water baptism and Holy Communion. But there are also Pentecostals who have another ordinance, foot washing. I have classmates of mine studying here from the Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee, and they have foot washing as a third ordinance. And sometimes, quite often, not sometimes, they practice foot washing and Holy Communion together. And they see that as equivalent in kind of stature in terms of an ordinance with water baptism and Holy Communion. My friends tell me that they have basins and towels in church to do all of these things. But we don't, for us, Assemblies of God, it's just a memorial. With regard to the church, maybe for this season, I thought I could throw in some thoughts here. We are considered by the governments and other groups as non-essentials for now. So that means they can do without us, or at least do without our church services. We are non-essentials. Hospitals are essentials. So no matter what we say about ourselves and compare ourselves with others, we are considered non-essential. And I think it is very important for us to not be brainwashed into thinking that we are non-essentials.
Yes.
We are very important to the world. We are important not only to our own people. So I am concerned that some churches have decided not to do anything. They have decided not to have any services. They have decided not to have live, or they have. In fact, some churches, I'm told, have advised their church members to go online and view other church services. I admire these pastors. They are very confident that their members will come back to them after that. The church have in the Bible quite often use the family as a description, as a metaphor for the church. The Chinese church has taken it a step further, so that those working in full-time ministry inside the Chinese church, they use family. They refer to themselves as family. So uncle and auntie and grandfather, grandmother within the church. They don't have pastor or whatever. They have uncle, auntie in the church. So we are a family, and to consider this family unit as unimportant or non-essential is rather dangerous. So we tend to have a very, very conservative idea of the church, although we will not take the position of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church have kind of relaxed on that a little bit since some years ago, about whether you can have salvation outside of the church. At least they have some recognition.
So, Pastor Tamwan, just going to cut here a bit here. Reflecting on the pandemic now with COVID-19, has Pentecostal, from your understanding or experience from the global perspective, have they come up with any positions or papers or any writings on the reflection based on COVID-19 and pandemic?
I think in terms of reflections, they're all over the place. If you go on Facebook, go anywhere, you'll find some of these reflections. In fact, there are official reflections on that. But in terms of official papers, I'm not exactly sure whether they have any position papers on this. And I don't know what they will write about. Is it like they're going to say if this is from God or this judgment or whatever? So I don't think there will be any positions at this point. I would expect some kind of post-COVID-19 theology to come out.
Right.
That's quite usual. The church
Yeah.
tend to be reactionary, and after the fact, there will be some lots of theologies that will come out.
Okay.
Right now, I don't think there is any. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
There's any
Okay.
position papers as such. Yeah.
Well, the rest of the panelists, if you want to say anything or ask any question, feel free to join in the conversations. I just have one more because I have friends who are, because of this pandemic, people are forced to stay at home. So they are kind of like conducting communion virtually, perhaps for their first time in their whole lifetime. And that caused some of them to start challenging. Some of them are Pentecostal. So as you have said, Pentecostal, we have a more on the ordinance view than a sacramental view. We are more memorialism. But some Pentecostal have this concern whether should we just stay on with the memorialism, or are we in any way diminishing the communion as a Pentecostal? So is there any discussion that you know of Pentecostal moving towards a more sacramental view, and because of this current situation?
I wonder whether we should call it virtual communion or not, because the elements of the communion are at the homes.
Right.
So I don't think anybody's emailing pictures and say this is the body, and emailing pictures this is the blood. I don't think anyone is doing that, and so it is in that sense. It's not really virtual. The head of the family in a home, or the watch party. Sometimes we have watch parties or whatever. The group that's in a home, we in our church, we actually ask them to come a day or two earlier, or to collect if they are within reach of the church or of our home. And if not, we tell them what to buy and how to prepare for it, and we give them instructions. So we do have the elements, partaking the elements together. So it's not, in that sense, it's not really virtual.
Good. Well, for anyone who's joining us live from Facebook, just to make sure you know what we are doing a conversations on the doctrine of the church as well as the Holy Communion. And Pastor Tamon here has just shared with us the Pentecostal perspective of what we hold on to these matters, and we will continue to discuss other aspect of this topic. And if you have questions, feel free to post in Facebook, so that we have Pastor May Ong who will help me to get the questions up, and I will just post it up here for the rest of the panels. Very good. Perhaps we may move on to the next topic, and if any of the panelists, if you have questions or anything to add in, feel free to do so. If not, then we'll move on to the next questions or this aspect.
Allow me to just make a comment on this Holy Communion. I think when we speak of Pentecostal theology, whether it's we view it as an ordinance or otherwise, I think we need to recognize that theology emerged out of historical context. And in one sense, classical Pentecostal, which is our tradition, emerged out of a situation, particularly in the States, where it is a reaction against dry formalism. Okay? And a second point I want to make is this: would it really be fair? It would not really be fair for us to say that there is a particular Pentecostalism, because right now Pentecostalism is actually very much a global phenomenon, and they come in from a very wide range of perspectives. And therefore, even the earlier divide of how you want to define, is it ordinance, is it transubstantiation, consubstantiation, or otherwise, it may not actually answer the whole thing. But I think nonetheless, one thing all of us do recognize, regardless of how you can do it, we do realize that when faith is exercised, whether you actually have Holy Communion in the church, or I would agree with Tamon, you can't use the word virtual, where somebody says that the pastors speak over the video and then you do it at home. When there is real faith, I think that's also the real ministry of grace. the communication of God's grace.
Right. Good point there, Pastor Nam Chen. This brings us to the whole issue of conducting communion in a distant manner. That means through online. So, I mean, now we are in COVID-19. We can't go to the church hall or church building or literal congregations. So most of us are at home, and then I have seen a lot of pastors. What they do is they pre-record their communion service, as in they conduct the communion with a camera in front and records that. So let me maybe perhaps I ask Pastor Christopher Park, because he is a senior pastor. I'm sure you have a lot of experience on this now. What do you think about this? Is there an acceptable way to conduct communion via a video? And what are things that we should take note? What could be the implications on this?
I guess the first thing that we need to answer the question is the purpose. Why are we doing virtual? Online. And of course, the situation is currently we are unable to meet, and therefore, this is possibly the best platform. In the current setting that we have. And to ask whether it's acceptable, I think that the Bible talks about how we can find ways and means to stir one another's faith. And if we can find a better platform, of course, by all means. But in the current generation, it's a very postmodern. In fact, even it's driven by media. It's driven by online platforms. And you're talking about reaching beyond the borders. But having said that, there are definitely some concerns when people do virtual. The question of what to use, what kind of elements to use. I think the whole conversation comes to, do you do it reverently? Some people take it very casual. Some people downplay the aspect of preparation. I think that whether you do it physically in a church or over a video, but for my church, I wanted to give a sense of what we call togetherness in the moment, and therefore we do it live. Okay, so what we do is there are preparations made ahead where members are told what we do the same timing, the preparation of the elements as close as possible. If not, you can't because of the MCO. Some elements that will represent the time that you can have it with your family or loved ones there. And I will conduct it over the Facebook Live. So everyone does it together, so that it gives a sense that we may not be physically together, but because of the intention, the key thing is the intention of celebrating a communion together and with holy reverence. I think that's very important. And coupled with that, I think there are some practical considerations, because you can't gather. So you have to think about, the vulnerable, you have to think about whether it's possible. So those are considerations that you put in together. Even if they lift it up right now, you still have to ask the question, should the younger ones come? Should the older ones come? And so while it may be temporal, I think that for now, this is one of the best platforms to use. But I don't think that it should be a permanent feature. It can be used as an alternative feature, but it shouldn't be something that I think is permanent. If we have the opportunity that we can come together, because the whole idea of fellowship is very different from when you have the ability to come together physically. The dynamics of interaction, the word fellowship, is quite a thing to fellowship over online. You don't really hear the kind of vibes whereby you're able to sense a person's presence, different from when you see through online. And so that is very important. And I want to pick up on some thoughts that the two other gentlemen have shared about faith, because it is very true that Hebrews 11:6 says that without faith it's impossible to please God. So it is not just about watching a video or live. The element of coming with anticipation, the element of coming with faith is the part that is very important. If you just watch a video, then you can virtually watch any video, and still have no interaction. But the dimension of faith in the Pentecostal heritage that we have is that faith is important. Responding to the overtures or even the suggestions of the speaker or the preacher, and so that makes it very important. So the significance is so powerful that when faith is involved, then it causes us to have our faith strengthened. And we are social beings. It's very difficult, really, to conduct communion in silo. No, you shouldn't do it alone. I mean, some of our members who are single, I will tell them, no, log on so that at least you can see someone and do it. But can you imagine if you don't have this, you are doing alone, and it is virtually impossible to do communion as a single individual, because fellowship. You can say fellowship with the Holy Spirit, the Father, but the bottom line is we are social beings, and the idea of a vertical relationship is also shared out in the horizontal with fellow beings. So I think that the key thing is there must be certain reverence that you come, coming before the Lord. The dimension of the faith factor is very important, because that is the part that actually changes the whole the dimension of our interaction. Whether we use unleavened bread like some churches do, they put a lot of effort to that. As far as I'm concerned, I think that we are using it as a memorial, and therefore the content of the meal is not so much of the elements, but rather the behavior. I think that coming before the table is very important, and I think that the idea of just a simple but a humble approach is what is needful. So because it's supposed to help us deepen our commitment, remind us of the work of Jesus Christ in our lives. At the same time, that is the component of discipleship that we want to deepen. Why do we remember? So that we are constantly reminded that this life that we live has been bought with a price, and that there is an element of hope that we will see Jesus face to face. And we are told to live in remembering this work in our lives as an ongoing process of our sanctification. We are looking forward to the day when He comes up for the church. So in conducting a virtual communion, I think that it doesn't change the importance of those preparatory steps that you do physically. You take in consideration as much as possible, so that those elements become, whether on camera or off camera, becomes your step, because it is that important. I mean, we look back into Leviticus, we come before God, they are so meticulous in the steps. It shows who God is. So we don't come in a wanton manner, we don't come simply come, we come prepared. As a celebration, and there's a time where we do reflection. There's a time that there are those of us who ask for forgiveness. I mean, there are many elements in fact, but those are very important. Reverence, the act of faith, and the part of fellowship. That we need to come.
Right.
Let me tell you a story.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was in America in an Assemblies of God church, and there was Holy Communion. And it was wine, which is okay with, but it was white wine.
Oh.
So when I looked at it, it's like, it's just like water. It's white wine.
It's not soda water.
I felt a little bit uncomfortable because the symbolism of blood with red wine, we've always associated them together. And so after the service, I asked them, why did they use white wine? I mean, the first answer was Jesus did not say we have to use red wine. He just said fruit of the vine. So, okay, they have got it. Seems like they've gotten it worked out theologically. But the real reason I found out later was because they did not want to stain the carpet. Just red wine. Once you stain the carpet, that's gone. That was the real reason.
Oh, okay.
So when you mentioned the millennials and everything, symbols are not so important to millennials. They want to talk about real things, real stuff. These are symbols, and that's our challenge, I suppose. After generations of talking about this as symbols to help us remember, how are we now going to tell them this is serious stuff? This is not just symbols. In the past, we would watch movies and people would die actually just to keep the flag standing up. War movies, this is an older generation. The new generation will think this is stupid, dying for a flag. You need something more substantial and real rather than symbols. So that has been my challenge, letting young people no, whatever we may call them, millennials or what, know that even though they are symbols, they are very important. And I think one of the ways to do it for me is to tie these symbols very, very close to the reality.
Yeah, true.
So to always keep them very close together, the cross and the shed blood and body of Christ, and tie these symbols very closely together, and and we won't have empty symbols. And for the younger generation, symbols almost always are empty, even though they have their own symbols without realizing it.
Yep.
So that's why I was talking about the part of. I mean, I want to end this portion by saying that there is the orthodoxy, the right thinking, with the orthopraxy, the right practice. See, what we believe, should also be reflected in the way that we will conduct it. That's why it's important. As close as possible, giving the meaning to it, so that when you identify, you see it as clear as possible, and the part of the discipleship. So the right thinking with the right practice is crucial to me. And that is something that it should cut across generations, even though the millennials and those after that have their own. But I think that the depth of the meaning has to be communicated, so that they understand that while it is a moment of celebration, it's also a sober moment of reflection. No, you have to have that dimension. And if you never teach that and you never communicate that, then that generation will very much water down its significance in the practice. So between orthodoxy in terms of our right thinking and orthopraxy in terms of the right practice now.
Right. I'm going to throw in something to this whole topic. There are some people who have very much concern of this whole thing about online communion, and it can create harm, such as people become more individualistic. They kind of partake of Holy Communion by themselves individually. They don't care about the whole congregation. So some may opt for not doing it completely, not doing communion throughout this whole movement control. What do you think for those pastors who decided we don't do it, because if we do it, they will take it, it's possible to do it this way, then they won't come to church anymore. Then they will just stay at home and partake communion by themselves, eat the bread and drink the cup by themselves. So they say, okay, in that case, don't do it at all, so that they will yearn to come back to the church to long for the communion. So what do you think?
That, I think that is really a bit ridiculous. I think to me, the reality is this. We do not live like what it was even 30, 40 years ago, regardless of whether there's pandemic or no pandemic. Each one of our members right now have easy access to all kinds of thinking and theology from all over. And the idea of individualism and having communion on my own, now it has been around. There have been people who practice it. And your people are going to know about it anyway. And the very fact that you don't want to do it is not going to change. It's not going to change the fact that they get influenced. And this is where it's important. Chris has talked about the pastoral angle, the discipleship angle. You don't engage by doing nothing. You actually engage by doing something.
Yeah. Right. And there is a question from the Facebook page. What if this COVID-19 becomes like a permanent feature, like we will not be able to gather back into a mass gathering for at least few years, for example, because we never know if the vaccine is not out, we probably will not be able to gather with all this SOP. So what would you then recommend? Do you continue doing online communion, or is there a better way to do this?
My view would be this. I think that at some point they would open up certain levels of freedom. I mean, currently they are thinking about 30 people. So for churches that are much bigger than that, it's virtually impractical, to have service upon service. So you have to figure out. I think then you have to figure out how you empower. And I think that from AG perspective, we have very empowered leaders. Leaders can actually conduct communion, with express empowerment from the pastor. So instead of gathering in a church whereby you cannot go more than 30 people, then you have ability to gather in small groups of 30, whereby you empower people, and then you can do so with those kind of scenario, and all over the city, all over the township, all over the state, depending on your constituent. That to me would be something that we will explore. Right. But I don't think that the virtual one will go away if that being the setting. The virtual will still be there. Only that it's good to have what we call certain contact points whereby there's a social interaction or fellowship, humans joining together within the MOH guidelines and within those allowed by the law. So I think that we will begin to think about creative ways. You have to probably decentralize much more. But I don't think that you will do away with the physical fellowship, because ultimately, after a certain point, you will still want to come back to a meaningful fellowship. And I think that will be something that we will do. But I don't think it will be forever.
Yeah. To follow on that, I mean, now we are already doing communion at home, right? Many people are doing it. So there are some people who have this concern that how do we ensure people who are doing it at home, they're doing it the right way so that they don't bring judgment upon themselves? Because if you look at Corinthians, they're very scared. If I do it wrongly, I eat the judgment upon myself. So there are many of you here are pastors. You are conducting communion, and I'm sure you are delegating to some of your leaders to teach your members. So what are the ways that you can help your members to teach? Is there any advice here from you guys so that they won't bring judgment upon themselves? Yeah. Anyone? Pastor Yin Ming, you want to say something?
As Pentecostal, I think our emphasis a lot of time is not so much on the form, but is on the heart matter. And if we are going to understand carefully about bringing judgment to ourselves, and that is based on the Corinthian passage, I think there is a background behind what Paul was saying to the Corinthian church, right? And in the context of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, is because there's a lot of abuses within the Corinthian church itself, even to the abuse of the Lord's Supper, whereby they are not doing it in a loving way, all right? Whereby you have the rich coming in advance and to the extent of getting drunk, and they were not caring enough for the poor, for those who are not able to come on time. So it's in the context, that's why the Holy Communion, we need to, one element we need to emphasize is that it should be done in the corporate sense. It's not so much to be done individually. When Jesus instituted the Holy Communion, it was in the context of the Passover meal. It was in the meal. Right? And you trace back to Old Testament, the Passover meal is not to be done alone, it's to be done in the family setting. It's always people, within the family, or even guests that are in the home, right? They are being protected. It is always within the family. There is a narration of the history of why they are celebrating the Passover. And we believe that, the meal that Jesus was conducting, the Last Supper, was, actually a Passover meal. So the same context of doing communion collectively is important. It doesn't matter if within the family, right? So for me, having that kind of communion in a home setting among family is okay, because that's how the Passover meal was conducted anyway. But of course, the challenge is for individuals when they don't have the corporate body with them. So I believe the judgment for themselves is not so much of you doing it wrongly, you take the step wrong, maybe you're holding the cup with the right hand, you use the wrong hand. I don't think that is the kind of a step of formality, but it's to do with the heart, right? In the context of the church, are we rightly related with people? Because we talk about the Holy Communion in the context of 1 Corinthians, when Paul used it so strongly to them, is because they did not exercise love. You see, all right? And the communion is also talking about the love of Jesus as sacrifice for us as well. So I think we have to, that's where teaching come in, discipleship come in, to tell them that it's not so much of the form that you are afraid that you are doing it wrongly, taking the wrong kind of element, whether leavened bread or unleavened bread or the wrong kind. It's not that much. It's really the heart, the push to God. Yeah.
I always find that in the traditional church services, they used to have a very complete liturgy on Holy Communion. So everything is written, you just read from the screen and it follows through. But whereas for Pentecostals, as far as I've observed, I can see every church seems to do it kind of differently. They don't necessarily follow a specific steps. Would it be a good idea? I mean, just pose a question is that churches will start formulating a kind of standards of liturgy so that when you teach your members, your leaders, as we talk about decentralizing, then they can just follow that, so to speak, procedures to do it in a rightful manner. Would you think that would be a good suggestion?
Victor, I don't know whether you are directing that question to me.
I mean, I'm asking for everybody. Yeah.
Okay. And because then, but I'm probably the only church that I know in AJ Church in Malaysia that actually follow a liturgy for communion. And the reason I do it is because I think that for communion, I want to have participation. And most of the time, the communion is done and officiated by the pastor. The pastor and of course you ask one elder to pray for the cup, one elder to pray for the bread, but the rest of the congregation just sit down there, and the only thing they do is to drink and eat, and then that's it. So I thought then that to have a liturgy written and adapted that is and would be comfortable to Pentecostals, and I instituted that kind of experimentally. And I found our members like it. And so there is a strict liturgy that is, now I vary between 2 or 3 liturgies so that it don't become stagnant, that they can follow without thinking. So then sometimes we use this one, sometimes we use that one, but it's always given beforehand. So when they go through, it's also a way of teaching them what the community is all about. And most Pentecostals, they kind of free-form kind of thing. They say this and the devotional thought and things like that. But there is a strict, what we call doctrinal content, also content. This is what we do, and there is the response that they have. So one of the things that we do, particularly the most important response, I tell you this most important response is the recitation together of the mystery. Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. This is the mystery of the faith. So they say that, and they say that out loud, and so this is what we proclaim. And so in that particular sense, I find that it's easier for me to kind of incorporate a kind of communion. Communion is not so much for me as the elements and the things that, and as Pentecostals, and we tend to have a pretty what we call an Zwinglian view, which is also basically the elements is not that vital. But I think communion is the getting together. So when we have in the church, you find that there's sort of a separation when the pastor does it and then the members don't do it. Then when we go to virtual and if you do it on Facebook Live and you don't even see what they're doing. So I decided that that in my Sunday service I have 2 portions. One is the YouTube Live where I preach and they listen. And then when we are able to go communion or any other thing, we go into Zoom, and where we ask them to and make sure that the videos are there. So we see every individual, we see everyone, and I use the squares, the share screen, to go through literature with them. But they do see everybody, so there is a certain connectedness that we have. So we do see the various elements that people prepare. They don't have the cups, and so they have different cups. And we tell them, some will have Ribena, some will have a grape. No one got wine yet, and but they don't ask. They don't tell. I don't ask. It's okay, because we see it's red, and but we do it together, and we sit together, and I think there is a certain. And then when they participate, they also participate verbally and the liturgy, and it binds us together particularly.
Right.
I know some people say, oh, at first they will say, are we going to be like Catholics? No, I don't think it's a matter of being Catholic. I think that I use a very contemporary liturgy, and that makes sense, and very biblical, and no transubstantiation, no what do you call transubstantiation, very strict to the scriptures, and physically, and they liked it. And of course, there is always the problem that the people become formalized, but no, I think symbols are important. If we don't have symbols, and that we use them, they will create their own symbols. They will. Humans are people that cannot live without symbols.
Correct.
For example, and a lot of Christians will say, no, we don't want symbols. We want to be free form, things like that, and we don't want all these things. Then I say, when you have a wedding, would you also have free form? They want symbols. So wedding is very important. They want to have the symbol kind of thing. They want to exchange a ring. They want to have a kiss. They want to, but this is all symbolic. So if it's important for the wedding, how much important for us for worship? Yeah. And so I basically, and particularly, so in that particular sense, I have no real problem with that particularly. And the virtual, when this started, and there were some people who said, oh, we cannot go virtual because we cannot have full what we call communion and experience. So we will suspend all communion services and go into time of captivity or lament or mourning, particularly. And so until the day when we come back and have communion separation. Some churches, I think, did try to do that, but there was a pushback. And so basically virtual, I think the only virtual type that is unacceptable is that we have some of a game virtual kind of a thing. So you have a avatar and everybody goes inside and you have a communion setting, and then you have everybody participate. That kind of virtual, I think that is unacceptable. But the virtual thing that we actually drink the wine or the grape juice and we eat the bread, I think that is sufficient, and a body or an experience there. The only virtual thing is that we are not local in one place, but we can be together. We see one another, and we speak to one another. We pray to one another.
That's right.
And I think that is that's sufficient. I think, and for a communion, particularly. So I think it's for me. You know, I know some people may not have a recorded kind of a thing, and then everybody do, but I want our church members to see one another, and to talk to one another, and to pray for one another. And that I found that the avenue of using Zoom was so flexible that we can actually do a communion virtually in the best possible way. And of course, we will say that this is a temporary kind of situation until we come back together.
That's right.
And this is not going to be something, and it is kind of emergency situation kind of a thing. So there was time, and the time to come together, we will come back together, and I think that they will be more meaningful, particularly.
Right. Okay. I was just reading something recently that talk about the danger of Christian becoming more Gnostic by days, because we don't emphasize on the physicalness of our ordinances or sacraments, and we talk so much about everything online, virtual, so that there is a danger of moving towards that directions. I think what Koki highlighted to is very important. The importance of the symbols itself, it has to represent, and that must be a physicalness to it. So this whole virtual online communion that you see the avatar in the internet that's doing this, I don't think that is something we should we should try to avoid that by all means.
Anyone actually do that? I don't remember.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
I hope they don't do that.
Yeah. So as for physicalness, of course, when we talk about gathering, we can't come back to the church big gathering, but we can always gather at our own home with our family members, or best if we have Christians in our neighborhood, we can gather with our neighbors. You know, even though they come from different churches, perhaps this is the best time to have communion with different denominations within our own neighborhood. And many of us don't even realize who stay in our neighbors. Perhaps this is something we can think further on. Yeah.
I'm also thinking that, you know, when we speak of this, we are really talking about good theology of the Holy Communion. That is not just when you think of theology, what is the context of the Holy Communion when you think of it from what Yin Ming said earlier, Old Testament, the Lord's Supper, the gospel accounts,
right,
and of course even the Corinthian accounts, that the Holy Communion, it is not just something that you celebrate individually. It is very, very much theologically, it's very much a communal uh, affair. It is an affirmation of that I'm a part of the body of Christ. And in one sense, some of the now liturgies are developed actually over centuries, also simply because liturgies to me it's just crystallized. It is you have people that who think deeply and they're able to summarize the ideas into very short phrases, and it becomes very meaningful. And there is an advantage there. There's a strength there that we need to leverage on. I would fully agree with what Brother Koki have said. And at the end of it, if you're going to have a meaningful Holy Communion, a lot
right.
also, that's where it comes out pastors also. Let's have a more comprehensive theology of the Holy Communion.
Yeah, agree on that. Just along that line, I'm just asking those of you who have, perhaps you are members who do not have the internet facilities, for example. How do you all do communion for those who can't join your Zoom sessions, for example? There are some people who are asking, are we then depriving them of their privilege if they do not have Zoom? Any advice here, anyone?
If they can't meet and physically, they can't meet digitally, I think in one sense it's something that we have to consider. I don't see there's anything much to be done, and probably encourage them and to then look for the day when we can come together. I think that is. I don't think that I would encourage you do your own communion, and because communion is communion, communion is with other people. Communion is not Catholic and a mass kind of thing that the individual receiving of grace. I think that if we unable to, then I don't know, maybe on the phone, then I don't know, and some kind of conference, and that might be a possibility, but probably it's difficult, and if we don't have internet, we don't have and we have some members who have no access to this, or who whatever it is, and there is nothing much. I think, and I can only hope you can try to get somebody to get you the internet access and things like that, and join, or we can find a way for you to come into church, or in a home and a community with you. But when you have a lockdown, right now I'm really totally locked down. I cannot go out of my house particularly, and there's no way I can do anything. And
I guess you can try. I think that even without a video, we still have the access of the phone. And time and again, some people we can't access, but we instantaneously will pray with them over the phone. And we receive the prayer with faith. I think in the same manner, that is a doable thing. For those who really don't have an internet access, I think the minimum they would have is a phone, which we can actually get them to prep, get some simple elements. I mean, we have to explain that while they can't be access some of the elements that we would want them to have as close as possible as a symbol, yet the act of doing so and the element of faith, when we do it over the phone, with direction and praying with them, is an act of communion. That's why you can't do it in solitary. You have to have someone. And what best persons to do it now? If a pastor or a leader would just arrange a time to call the person, have those elements arranged, and then do it over the phone. I guess the key thing is the intention behind it. When the least best platform is used, we can still use it. But the element of faith, the element of a fellowship is still there, which we do with commemoration.
Good. Perhaps this is the last question, then we'll move on to another topic. Otherwise, we don't have enough time. There is a question for Pastor Tamon here, because you mentioned about tying the symbols to reality. can you further explain how do you do that with the Holy Communion symbols? What are things that we should take note of to help people to tie the symbols to reality?
I think the first thing, of course, we should not be too casual about the way we take our Holy Communion. Rushing through, and we don't do that in the Assemblies of God churches. We are very serious about that, even though we believe that it's a symbol and there's no like magical powers to those elements. But we don't rush through. I think that's very important. And I quite like the idea of having some kind of liturgy. Not something that becomes so oft repeated until it becomes a formality. And Koki has mentioned that he varies that liturgy as well. I think that's helpful to have some form of liturgy. We have some form, except that we don't have the whole congregation respond properly. We ask them to respond in their own way. But a congregational liturgical response could be a helpful thing. The other thing is, I think it's important always to retell the story. That's very important. I think Koki mentioned repeating the mystery again. Retelling the story is very important. Now, when you go to a Chinese church, it's not so much these days, but in a Holy Communion, in a lot of Chinese house churches, they always cry. They will shed tears because that's very powerful for them, and to remember. And I think in some way, it's quite difficult to remember what happened on the cross. I mean, if we truly remember, it's quite difficult not to cry. What's been done for us. Retelling that story would be what I would do. Choosing the right songs would be what I like to do. There are not that many good songs for Holy Communion from among the hill songs. It's so songs that people can sing. It's amazing. I can't get my musicians to play Nearer My Cross to Thee. It's like they don't know how to play. And I have to force them to learn a song like that. It's every time it's the same Amazing Grace. But there might be good to sing some songs of the cross, and so I would do all of that. And for me, the feelings part, Chris talked about Pentecostal spirituality with autopraxis, autopathy. I think that feelings part is also important, not just orthodoxy. That people really capture in their imagination the reality of the suffering of Jesus during the Holy Communion.
Right. Okay, let's move on.
Our songs concerned, and maybe. And we tried various different communion songs and kind of variety. And surprisingly, our members like to settle on one particular theme song, particularly. And so communion for us is by Matt Redmond, and Remembrance. I think it's very meaningful, and they always sings that. And there is that part where they actually sing the mystery,
Yes.
And dying and rising and coming back, and so. They always want to sing that song, and they always want to, song leaders always choose that song. So Pastor, are we going to sing that song? So sometimes I want to teach them other songs, but they still come. And sometimes teaching new songs is also very difficult during communion, because you want them not to be too preoccupied with trying to remember the words. You want them to worship. You want them, so they can sing something they can remember. And that's that.
Yep. Right, we better move on. Otherwise, time is catching up. Perhaps we talk about online church nowadays, because it's the in thing now. So, Pastor Yiming, perhaps you can share, because you have done quite a fair bit for your church. How do you think about what's your church takes on online services? What could be the implications? And now we are talking about people coming back to church, we're not allowed to sing because singing then cause infection. So if you come to church without singing, can you really have a church without singing? So what is your take, Pastor Yiming?
Yeah, I think online church is such that we don't really have much option now because we are not able to gather together. It can be done, but it is still not the ideal as far as church life and worship is concerned. There's a lot of limitation as far as online church is concerned, especially in the area of worship, because there's no congregational worship, together. And if you have a family, you worship your family, but you are single, you are practically maybe inside your room, you are just facing the screen, and singing on your own. So the corporate worship is lacking. Yeah. And even preaching, is a challenge to preach through a camera or the phone. Right? Because you are not able to engage the audience. And I believe as preacher, when we preach, we want to engage the audience. This is where we can see their response, Right. And this is where sometimes, you will just say things based on the response of the people. But now it is a bit rigid, right? Because you are not able to engage the people eye to eye, and more so sometimes, and even now, instead of having a direct live stream on the day itself, is pre-recorded. So that's why I find that it is a limiting in the sense. And of course, it also affects the fellowship for the church and the ministry to one another. As you say, online service, it can become viewership where people just log in and view, which is something that we do not want. We want people to be engaged with God, with the Word of God, and with one another. Right, and also in fellowship after service. So all this, after the online service, you cannot say, let's hang on and have fellowship together. You can't, people just log off, and they go and get their lunch or whatever things that is ready, Right. And online church is also limited, as I think somebody mentioned, like maybe some people are not so tech savvy. Some elderly folks, they are not able to connect. Their phones are old, and also nowadays you realize that internet is not so good. It's not so good. Some areas they don't have Unify and all that. So it's really hampered. So I find that, it can be done, but it is still very much limited. And then you will also need to have some right equipment and technical know-how to make it more effective or more complete. Actually at the first beginning stage of the MCO, I noticed a lot of pastors start putting their online because it's new to everybody. Maybe they want to learn from one another, and you can see a lot of very primitive kind of a online, just with a handphone and put it up, And there was one I see, it was totally wasted because you can't hear, right? And it was so far, they put the phone so far away from the speaker, you cannot even capture the voice, But nowadays, when you go online, you don't see them putting up anymore, and people begin to learn from their mistake initially. So having the right equipment is also very, very needed. So so how do we actually organize an online service? I think it depends on what we want, how we want it to be done. Whether you want to have it the most basic or the most sophisticated or somewhere in between, And of course, the most basic one is just you just have a phone, you just have, if possible, a mic, and then you just record it and put it up, right? But I see that nowadays churches are getting more better, right, in this platform. Instead of just recording through the handphone, they begin to do proper recording with a worship leader. Because I also know of their churches, they don't even have a worship. They just play the pastor message. That's all, you see. But, I think churches are learning more from one another as well, which is good, is improving. So you have a worship team, then you have the preacher, and then you also have, service director and so on and so forth. But I think the most challenging part is still getting the congregation to engage.
Yeah.
That will still be the most challenging part.
So for us, I'm just going to follow up with that, because participation is one of the greatest challenge here with these online services. What are the things or ways that you have tried to encourage people to participate more?
Okay, what we do is that we use online platform which is under the what you call the live church online platform. And what we do in order to engage the congregation, we have moderators. The moderator is like virtual ushers lah. Before the service start, we say good morning, welcome people. And if as any visitor, we actually encourage the visitor to identify themselves. Many of them don't identify themselves, but sometimes you will see certain name that's completely new, we'll hello them and so on and so forth. And we encourage them to, we even have a button whereby prayer request, we encourage them to click the prayer request button, and immediately it will go to a separate room whereby the pastor will chat with them, hello, is there, what's your need? Can I pray for you? So we try to get them. And there's also a button whereby we ask people, if you are new for the first time, you click on it, and you lead them to a kind of visitor's card, so to say, for them to fill in. As I say, it has not been very successful. Generally, people don't know, maybe they want to hide themselves. They don't want to do it. We also had a button whereby for altar call, we give altar call for salvation, right? And we ask them to click on the button. You want to receive Christ, or even for members, you want to respond to the message, click on the button and all that. You see. So for us, we have to do it by faith, because we are not even. Yes, all this is pre-recorded. It's not even Sunday. Whether people respond, don't respond, we don't even know it. So by faith, we just lead them in the sinner prayer, By faith, we will give the altar call and pray for them, Even pray for the sick. We will run it as though we are a live service. We run it as though we are live. We have service director. We welcome them. We pray for the offering. As much as possible, we want to give them a feel that as though it's a live kind of a situation.
Right.
Perhaps I can weigh in on this. We tried, because there were a lot of discussions whether we should do everything and then just record it as though it's a whole video running. And I was quite reluctant to do that, because I felt that it was just like watching a video. And so I tested a few things. And what we did was we did live worship. Literally, we will post it on the Facebook. There's a countdown. And then we will make sure that the broadcast list is sent out a few days ahead, telling them who is doing the worship. In fact, the song list is put up so the people are ready. And then we have people putting it on the comment section, the songs, so that you can follow through. So there is a live worship. The only drawback is you cannot feel the participation. And so we will tell people, when you come on, do a like, do a clap, do something kind of, so that we know that you're online, and then they can respond that way. And in the comment section, they can respond also. So that is for the live worship. And then from there, we will proceed to the recorded message. So in the message there, we will have those what we call notes that are put in together with the video, so that there are some high points that are put inside there, and people can follow through, which is very helpful. And then once we end that, at the end of the video, there will be another section to switch back to the live altar service. So we have the live worship, the recorded message, and then we go back to the live altar service, where I would dress the way I would have dressed in the video. So the only setting is the cross is not behind me, but just my home. But from there, I literally give two altar calls. One is for the members, for different needs, and then another altar call for salvation. So in the same way, when they log in, we will tell them, put a thumbs up or whatever, something to indicate that they're online. And at least there is the part on the recorded and the live experience. The only drawback is you do not really feel the response of people in that, there's people moving out or you go to them. But in that sense, we are trying to replicate a discipline whereby there is a live aspect of it, there's a recorded aspect of it, and then the live response to it. And that's what we have done. So I think that currently it seems to be one of the better things that we are doing compared with the first two services, where we didn't have a live altar call. And of course, the difficulty of some people navigating back, but you have to create videos whereby they know how to get back on. So that has been what we've been doing, the live worship, message, and then the live altar call, which we're doing online right now.
Good. Thank you so much for the advice. I think this is very helpful for some churches here who are watching and learning from all you guys. Good practices, best practice to help one another to get our members to be more involved. Perhaps maybe we want to move to a more theological kind of reflection. Pastor Koki, perhaps may I ask about your reflections here? How does this pandemic, this COVID-19, have affects the way we look at church as a whole, particularly on the doctrine of the church, our evangelical views of the church? What could be the possible implication with this pandemic?
I think one of the first things I think we need to remember or remind our people is this. This is not the first ever pandemic that ever happened. And we have pandemic, and the last one was 100 years ago. And the church has survived. The church has not changed. I don't think the doctrine of church necessarily have to change with this kind of things that happens. And Jesus already promised or said, you will have trouble in the world. You have problems in the world. You have this war. You have diseases. You have whatever it is. And the church continues on because the church is basically not based on the circumstances, but the church is built on what Jesus has done. Now, as evangelicals, we tend to have a much lower view, and we have a low doctrine of church, not very sacramental like the Catholics or the Anglicans or Lutherans. And so our Anabaptist or what called an evangelical view of the church is pretty low, particularly, but still really biblical. Basically, the church is community of believers, and as long as we remain family of God, as we remain as a community, I think that there's no necessity and for us to actually review or revise our doctrine of church. But doctrine is one thing, and what people are taught to believe. And as doctrine, and they take a class, this is what we are. But sometimes doctrine is more reflective of what we actually do. And you want to see what people believe, look at what they do. And so I think then doctrine also basically, in one sense, and is a reflection of what we actually do as church. And perhaps in this pandemic, and probably it has the greatest effect on big churches, mega churches, and coming together on the Sunday, and we have 3,000, 4,000, 1,000, 2,000, and that really impact them particularly. So when they say that we're going to relax, and now you're going to have 30, and how to have church for 30 people, and for small church like me, oh, it's hallelujah, because we are only 30 members, so 30 members is just nice. Maybe just thinking of us. So we didn't have to make any adaptation, particularly in that particular sense. And but I think important of coming to church is, I think, still vital. And because even though we are not talking about masses, and perhaps a lot of people think coming to church is one big celebration on Sunday with hundreds and thousands of people. I think that is a secondary thing, and that may be a good kind of thing. But coming to church on a Sunday, and as much as possible, is something that is essential. And for the government to say we are non-essential services, particularly in countries like ours, which is we are not a Christian majority, you find that we have no choice, particularly in that. And sometimes we have to say, okay, you say that, but we know we are essential. I think in the US, and they have pushed back and says church is essential service. There are downsides on that also as well, and particularly, and so we have to adapt ourselves. So particularly as long as we maintain our community, as long as we function as a church, function as the body of Christ, has pastoral care, and I think that essentially we may do things differently. And but our doctrine doesn't change actually, and our doctrine is supposed to be flexible and adaptable. And I think then we will survive this pandemic, and it might take 5 years, it might take 4 years, but modern people tend to be very short-sighted, and there are people who say, "Oh, this is the Antichrist," we're coming to millennium. Maybe it will, maybe there's really end time and this kind of thing. But pandemics have come, pandemics have gone, and there's great suffering, but we adapt, we survive. But it's a tremendous opportunity for the church to discover certain opportunities that probably we take for granted. And perhaps as an evangelical church, we tend to be very middle class. We take care of our members, we take care of our people, we come to church, we do our thing, we go back to our homes. And but the church is not only coming together. The church is serving community, so a healing community, and this is a time that we actually well, I let Nam Chen talk about the missions, and so this is one thing that I think the church has the opportunity to actually be the body of Christ for the world, and to be Christ's body for other people. And I think that it's not all negatives. And sometimes we think that we see when we cannot do this, cannot do that. But there are a lot of things we can do. There's a lot of things we can do and will do, and perhaps that will evolve in that particular sense. And
That's right.
so,
That's right.
and as far as government concerned, and I think there might be practical problems, and we can meet together to have meetings, to have elections and things like that. But I think we will find ways of adapting particularly. Again, I think for us, I think I remember then when I was doing theology under Paul Jewett, and in his doctrine of church, things that many times when we talk about church, we don't talk about organization, government, things like that. But the first thing that he put is church as fellowship. I think some of you can remember that, in their general council, they'll try to redefine the church. I spoke very, very strongly. Actually, no, you cannot change that. Most important, we are fellowship. We are fellowship. That is a theological word. That's a theological meaning. That's a concept. We are not an organization. We are not a denomination. We are fellowship. As long as we keep that, I think we cannot go very much wrong.
Right. Thank you. I mean, for myself, I've been reflecting on this whole pandemic. I think it's a good opportunity for the church to really come back to what we believe about the church. I think many people attend church without realizing what the church is truly about. They just join a fellowship. They thought they just joined there for clubs or something. Just go there for fun. But then when this thing strikes, they have to really ask the question, if the church supposed to be the body of Christ, what are we supposed to do now? And that leads us to the last topic for today. Pastor Nam Chen here, reflecting on mission. Since the church is called to evangelize, mission is the heartbeat of the church, our calling. So when we are going through this pandemic, this COVID-19, how do we go about to fulfill this commission that God has given to us?
I think that even before we speak of doing, we need to recognize that biblically, theologically, missions is first of all about who we are as a people rather than what we do. In other words, it's our spiritual DNA. And all the more when we are Pentecostals, it is really the impulse of the Holy Spirit working inside of us individually and as us as a church that is really constantly breaking out in expressions and in what we do. And let me use the Acts chapter 1 verse 8, the Pentecostal verse. It is really the impulse of the Holy Spirit moving the church to bring the gospel to the uttermost, to cross boundaries. And of course, when you look from Jerusalem to Samaria to the uttermost parts of the earth, traditionally it has been viewed and that is a geographical thing. But of course, right now we're living in the modern world. Those geographical things, boundaries, gets merged with the fact that right now it really is talking about boundaries of socioeconomic class, education, race. I mean, one of the things that emerge in our newspapers, and I guess people are realizing that in our Malaysian population of something like about 32 to 33 million, you're really talking about nearly 7 million. That is huge numbers. 7 million out of 33 million are actually migrants and migrants from all over, whether you talk about expat level or most of it is just pure contract workers. But when I reflect on on this whole pandemic, I was actually just supposed to fly to Nepal, and suddenly I was locked in.
Oh my!
I couldn't fly. The next thing I realized that even if I could fly, when I land in, I'm just going to be quarantined for 2 weeks. So therefore, I can't do anything. I had to cancel off that whole trip. But I want to identify two two things that emerge when I look at this whole pandemic. When you look at it sociologically, I think number one, this whole for the next 1 year, there's going to be a lot of restriction in travel.
Yeah.
And I just pointed out when we speak of mission at the international level, crossing boundaries, to me, in some sense, this actually emphasizes the fact of what mission is really all about. It is not being the superhero going from one country to another country. Mission is really facilitating, being a part of what the Holy Spirit is doing, and helping the church, the local church in every single place, indigenize.
Right.
Okay. So to me, the indigenization thing, when you talk about global and international missions, that part is very important. It is not about us being the great hero, but it's really, mission had always about us being the instruments of God, just helping to bring in what the gospel is all about to different communities of people. The second thing I observe is this. I think all of us realize that we are right now going through I would use the word a social psychological shift. Suddenly, everybody knows what is Zoom. I was forced to teach via Zoom, trying to figure out how to set up the whole contraption and teaching a group. And I think all of us know that right now, what we are doing right now, life is never going to be the same. And once the door opens, let's ride on all of this, whatever tools that we are using. Now, coming back to what I said earlier, that missions is not about, first of all, what we do, but who we are. What that simply means is this. The opportunities to reach out is always there. Okay? And right now, we are seeing it in Malaysia. Okay? Now I'm part of the what do you call it, the diaspora network, a small group of practitioners. I'm not a practitioner, but they just kind of invited me in, and all of us have. Many churches are part of this whole effort of helping migrants, and suddenly I think there are a lot more in our radar. But this is a time that we really need to be thinking about what is really missions all about. And maybe right now it's just simply staring us there, right there on the face. Now, I'm not saying that after this, don't go for foreign missions. But missions is not just about adventure. Missions is simply living out who we are as an identity, as a people of God with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Okay. And many churches are doing it. And I'm just trusting that, at the end of this pandemic, we're not going to stop there. But even during this pandemic, the practical things of just helping out people out with food, raising money. Now, all of us, everybody's suffering because the bigger fallout from the pandemic is not people getting sick. It is really the economy.
Economy, yes. The depression.
Okay. But for all of us who are middle class, no matter how bad we are hit, even if we lose jobs, it is not like what we are seeing in certain parts of the world, or even people. I think some of you might have read the story about literally in Kedah, people coming to the police station, turning themselves in. Why?
Yeah.
Because no money, no food. And this is really the challenge of the church, that, hey, we got to be doing something. Okay. And maybe I also want to give an encouragement to, I hear there have been churches and pastors saying that, because the economy is down, I don't think we're going to have any more mission collection and so on. Now, I think we need to be very pastoral, okay? Understand the economic issues involved. But this is also the time that there will be individuals, even out of their limited resources or cut down resources, they will still want to be involved, to be giving into missions beyond their own church.
Right.
First of all, the generosity is even there already in civil society.
Right.
And how much more the church actually should be rising up to the challenge. And just to share, I think there are people that are doing it. There are many of our AOG churches. I our church our AOG church in Lahad Datu, Sabah, practically every day they are doing food distribution to the migrants, and money is flowing in from different parts, and that's practical missions. Now, of course, let me say this: you don't give food and you don't give help with the condition that because I give you help, therefore you must hear the gospel. Okay, loving people is unconditional, but yet we do not ignore the fact that people do get touched, and we are seeing that again and again. And I think this is where the church should be saying that not so much that we don't do mission, but let's open our eyes on what can be done.
Yeah, I think with this, Koki was saying something.
I think, and for me, we probably will help if you look at Paul as a good example and for mission. And Paul is one of the greatest missionaries, and he traveled, he went everywhere, preaching, teaching, and that was the first part of his missionary and work. Then he was locked down, okay, and not by pandemic, but imprisoned. And through his letters and through his writing, he continued his mission. And now we don't write letters anymore, things like that. We have Zoom, so we have other things. And so I think we can learn from Paul particularly. And and the mission can never be tied down by anything. If you can go, we go. If we cannot go, we write or we Zoom or we deliver. And if you have a will, you'll find a way particularly. And there are opportunities. And I like Nam Chen, I'm very passionate about, and because of the migrants. We have a small migrant and a little thing in our church. Our church are not 30 people, but we have about 10 of them, and particularly who are migrant workers and illegal migrant workers particularly. And now with the pandemic, they got no jobs at all, and they were very, very shy and things like that. But once it was only when I asked them, "How are you doing?" and they say, "No food." So I asked our members, would you pledge, would you contribute, and ask some other friends. So we were able to collect a amount of money. One of them was still able to work at a bank account, and every week I send them some money so they can buy food. And we hold them accountable. They show me the receipt, they show me the pictures, but one of the things that really warmed our hearts was that the first big thing that we went, they said, "Pastor, we got so much food, and now that we're able to get, can we share with our friends and who didn't come to our church?" And here, so you help your people and they help other people. So it's like that, yes. And so they didn't just hoard for themselves, and they share with other Filipinos and other non-Filipinos in the area who are also suffering the same kind of situation. And that's mission. I think that's right. Mission.
That's right.
Yep. That's mission. I think it starts from where we are, and once we catch it, then the missions is not something that you just do overseas. It's if I look at Acts chapter 1 verse 8, it's something that you do both at the same time. You don't stop preaching in Jerusalem, but yet at the same time you don't limit yourself to Jerusalem. And the borders are not just geography. Today, to me, the biggest borders is not geography anymore. It is really all of these other borders. And the church, it is there in our DNA. And I think it's just the church has to arise. Maybe also another practical end. One more thought I just also had that, with all this new technology, and the people that suffer from the lack of technology is actually the poorer communities and some of the rural places. I'm just thinking, hey, the bigger mission churches, you might consider investing into some of these churches so that they could take advantage of some of this equipment. And that's practical missions.
That's right.
Instead of sending mission team. Because all you got to do is spend $3,000 or 3,000 ringgit instead of paying a 3,000 ringgit plane ticket. You can do a lot of stuff.
So I think mission we must maintain mission as the heartbeat of the church. We must not neglect missions. I think there is there is a tendency for the church when they go through certain crises, they go into this self-preservation mode and try to work things to make sure we have our members coming back to us, we have enough resources in our bank accounts, which is not entirely a bad thing. But if we just focus on that, then we might miss the very point of the reason of our existence. And what Namcha is saying is very good for us to rethink mission. Instead of just sending teams to overseas, which we can't do now, perhaps consider supporting some of the smaller churches in the rural area, which we do not have technologies, which do not have all these resources. And bear in mind, there are NGOs, Christian NGOs, Bible schools, seminaries that are still ongoing, doing the work, and with the crisis of economy is badly heated for all of this NGO because they don't have members, right? They don't have all these connections. So perhaps the bigger churches, the more resourceful churches, middle-class churches can think of mission in this aspect. Our time is coming to an end. Perhaps I'll just ask each of you panelists if you want to say one last word for our audience today with regards to the church and in the midst of pandemic and post-pandemic, what is one good advice or one point of reflection you want to leave with the audience? Maybe we start with Pastor Yin Ming. Yeah.
The church, I believe, is always a living church. And because it's always a living church, like Jesus has said that the gate of hell will not prevail against it. So the pandemic will not prevail against the church, but the church will prevail over the pandemic.
Amen. Pastor Christopher Park. Are you going to unmute yourself?
We should not lose the human side of the church in a time where people operate from fear or very reserved. We should try to make sure that we can shine even greater. The darker the room is, the brighter we can shine. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for us to really do much more than we can in the past.
Wonderful, wonderful. Pastor Tamwan?
We always see revival in terms of large numbers of people coming together. So it'd be quite interesting in this season how revival might happen without people coming together. I have deliberately chosen to speak and preach the same kinds of messages in the same way than before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I did not really want, I don't see a need for my spirituality to change because of the pandemic. I think if my spirituality has changed so much, perhaps there was something wrong with my spirituality to begin with. And I see a lot of more people praying, a lot more people doing a lot of things, 24-hour prayer chain, and we have this on campus. So my question to my colleagues who have done that is, will this 24-hour prayer chain continue after the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good
Or are you going to wait for another pandemic before you have another prayer chain? So I would not want to see a situational Christianity, but I would like to see all of us obedient to God and whatever the situation may be, to fulfill the mission that God has given to us.
Wonderful, wonderful. Pastor Namchen, Dr. Namchen?
I want to say that, with the onset of this pandemic, people are shocked, people are surprised. But I'm reminded that God is never surprised.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a strength and an assurance for all of us. And I will say to the church, let the church continue to be the church, God's church, living it out in this world, whatever comes.
Thank you. Pastor Koki?
Okay, I'm going to be very cliche. I'm going to be very biblical. And our church motto is love God, love people, make disciples. And whether pandemic or no pandemic, this is our DNA. We want to love God in our worship, love God in all that we do. And I think the second thing is, and probably most is love people. And I think we have a point for that. And then make disciples.
Praise the Lord. With that, we'll come to a close for this sessions. If you have any other questions, come to Bible school and learn more. There's a time to promote. We have MPTS president here. If you want to join our regional school, now they are open for online classes. Feel free to drop Pastor Taman an email and inquire more. Thank you all, everyone who joined in our Facebook Live. It's a pleasure to have you here. And thank you all for panelists for these wonderful sessions to reflect. I know there are some questions we couldn't have the time to address today, but I think we have addressed sufficient enough for people to take back to, think further and reflect further. And then if you really need to know more, please join a Bible class in a seminary or Bible college nearby. All right. God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the panelists. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Good job. Praise the Lord.
Thank you, everybody.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hallelujah.
God bless.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Okay, all bye-bye.
Bye-bye.